Hello and welcome along to another episode of the Engagement Index. This time we are talking about talking. Yes, that's right. So one of the big findings from our report, which was really interesting, and I've mentioned this to a few people and they've found it surprising,
Yeah,
and that is that a great deal of the content
yeah,
that we've analysed, people have actually found out about it through word of mouth.
yeah,
And it's been spread through word of mouth. Whereas people would always assume, okay, well, it's been shared on social
yeah,
media and things go viral on social media. But actually, truly engaging content is content that is, yes, it could originate in social media or anywhere else, but it gets talked about.
yeah,
So it's word of mouth, how
yeah.
important word of
And
mouth
I'm not
is.
surprised by that because I
No,
think when you work in building content in news, that's what you're
yeah,
always talking about, isn't it? Is it a talker?
yeah,
Is it something that people are going to ring their mum and tell them about? Have you seen this or did you hear about? And
mm,
that becomes the sort of root of what a really, really good story is. How we would like define that when you're pitching a story to the desk, you'd be thinking, do people care about this?
the desk. You might
Sorry.
have to explain what that is.
Oh,
So the
so the
the
to the
news
news
desk.
desk,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah.
If I was pitching to you, for example, and you didn't like my story,
Yeah, what would I
but
say?
yeah, what would you say? It's not a talker. We're not
Mm,
interested in it, and so I think that's quite an interesting finding from the report, and I'm not surprised by it really when you strip away all the sort of hot air around
mm,
multiple channels and if this channel's going to overtake that channel and no one's everything gets found out through social media now.
mm,
I don't think that's necessarily true. I think the other point is when you think about news and content, where does it come from? So social media can generate stories and content and ideas and
mm,
memes,
mm,
but a lot of the news comes from people doing actual news gathering, and
mm.
so I think that's they understand the principles of what makes something engaging because it's been built into news gathering over like 100 years of doing
Yeah.
it.
Well, it's interesting you say that because there is also a stat in our report that says, so out of those top 10 moments
Yeah.
that where we found the top 10 most engaging moments
Mm.
in a particular month, that 60% of those moments were actually originated from traditional media. So I guess that a question that we get a lot as PR professionals,
Yeah.
that is traditional media still worth going after? Is it still influential?
100%. For the reason
Why?
partly that, well, for the one reason, for the reason I mentioned before, which is news still sets agendas, print still sets agendas. It's
Mm,
still the place where stories are generated, where it comes from. It might end up on social media. It might end up, you might hear about it on TikTok, but where's it come from
mm,
originally? And the second point, I think, is that, what I hear definitely from clients is that CEOs, C suite in general, the boardroom, they want to be in print. They want to be in the broadsheets, in the tabloids. They want to be, that to them gives them that credibility
mm,
and that, validation that, you're getting that credibility from the news organization that you matter, that you are relevant.
mm,
I think there's nothing, if they didn't care about that, then they wouldn't care if their rival
mm.
was was the page lead in the Times on Tuesday morning. They would be not a problem. It's still, they really want to be in there. There's still a lot of importance placed on that, and then the other channels can still work together around that. Doesn't mean it's not
Mm.
one or the other.
I still like the idea that there's a minister, a government minister, who has their red box and they
Yeah,
open it up and then they see the press clippings.
yeah,
I wonder whether that happens still. I should imagine there's a digital form of that, but they still care about if what the FT are saying,
yeah,
what the Times are saying, maybe even what the Guardian's saying. But so our clients wanting to get into those traditional forms of media, let's say it's a Radio 4
mm,
Today program, good example, always an agenda setting
yeah,
program. Are they wanting to get into those to have influence,
yes,
or
yeah, definitely. I think there's so much authority that comes with I'd say particularly the broadsheets and particularly the BBC, the
mm,
credibility that they give a brand that hasn't waned,
mm,
and I think that's what people are looking for because it says to a customer or a consumer or your audience, that a third party is endorsing what you're doing. Yes, you can pay for as many eyeballs as you want on your content, but that earned coverage has still got real high value and credibility, because the bar is higher. You have to reach the bar and get past the gatekeeper to get to the point that to get in. You can't just buy your way in.
No.
So there's a credibility attached to that, and I think there's also a credibility attached to, from a reader's perspective, it would look as though that journalist has chosen to cover you. They don't know the machine that goes on behind that.
Do you reckon is it harder to get coverage in mainstream press than it used to be?
I think it's different. I don't think it's harder or easier. I think everything comes down to contacts, but it always did, if you ask me. That hasn't changed. I think journalists are harder to get hold of. I mean, when we were in newsroom, you had a phone on your desk, and that phone would ring all day long, wouldn't it? And you'd be either getting stories from PRs, or you would be, or stories coming in. That's changed. But we speak to our team all the time and talk about getting out and meeting journalists, because everything, just like in any sector and business as well, it comes down to human relationships. It's people dealing with people, and if you have those relationships and you have someone's mobile number, then you can pitch to them just as easily. What doesn't work is the cold call, and it never did.
No, and we hear a lot, don't we, in our industry about forget traditional media, it's dead. Media relations is not worth it. Make a video, do your digital marketing, go direct to customer, etc., etc. So, and I wonder, and it's just a wonder, I have no evidence to prove this, but it is a feeling that actually it's hard, very hard to get coverage, right? It's very hard to get your brand message in the media that what you believe to be the most influential. So I wonder whether that is almost a rhetoric that people are saying who work in our industry, like, oh, it's not worth going to traditional media because it's it's not even influential anymore. Let's just go here because it's difficult.
And I think this is what the engagement index is really why it's so interesting, because this isn't about eyeballs, it's about engagement and messaging and a really strong piece of well-crafted content in print or in online as well, but from one of those titles that I mentioned, the BBC broadsheets, that has got it's so rich in what it's talking about and what it's saying about your brand. And it's written, independently. It's not, anything else looks like advertising to a consumer. So I think that gives it that independence. I also think where, AI coming in, where is AI? Well, I'm so with it. But with AI,
it's not long now. It's on its way. AI is on its way.
The advent of AI. Where is AI getting? Where is it sourcing its information from? It's sourcing it from online. It's sourcing it from interviews or brand mentions, and the way you build that archive up is by getting coverage. So it's not just the coverage for coverage's sake for the boardroom. You could argue in 10, 20 years, Gen Z are going to be in the boardroom, and they're not going to have those same feelings. So media relations will shift, but AI is fueled. It needs something to power it, and what it's hoovering up is brand mentions and people talking about your brand. So I think that's also a really interesting time for media relations sort of lower down the chain. So the trade titles that have maybe been a bit overlooked in the last few years, actually they're going to become more and more relevant because the interview that you did with your CEO in there, all of that is going into the mix with AI and helping to shape how your brand is seen.
Yeah, which would judge which is the most authentic out of those interviews you've done and present that
because
to the...
it won't scrape advertising in the same way. It will understand and interpret that as advertising, whereas a third-party recommendation, or third-party, by that I mean press, will be seen as higher quality and higher value. It is seen as that, so it will use that more prominently in its summary of who you are and how it's trying to describe you.
Just getting back into, like we talked about earlier, a story being a talker.
Yeah.
So what is the art of a story being a talker? My question for you is that when you were a journalist many years ago.
It's not that long ago, Sav.
Many years ago, as a child. When did you start? About 12. When you're a 12-year-old journalist. how did you know that you had a good story? Before you'd mention it to anyone, you've got a good story. How did you know that it was a good story?
Oh, it was a feeling rather than a. It was just I would know that I'd want to go and tell someone this piece of information. I'd be excited about it, and I'd be like, I can't wait till whoever hears this, whoever
Yeah.
you've got in your mind. But what did you think? What would you say?
Yeah, you get that buzz. I mean,
Yeah.
I think I remember in my first job, when not all of my anecdotes start with when I was at the Bucks Herald, but my
Most
first
of them
job,
do. Most of them do.
my
Yeah.
first job on a local newspaper, someone told me it's going to take you 6 months to get your news sense.
Yeah.
So don't try to have it
Yeah.
now. It will take you 6 months to get your news sense. And I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. But probably 3 years later,
Yeah.
I suddenly understood what that person was talking about when I finally got my news sense.
Yeah.
And that is like when you're interviewing someone and they reveal a story during that interview,
Yeah.
and you go, "Did it? That's the story."
Yeah.
And immediately you figure it out, what the headline would be, how
Yeah.
it would look, the plaudits you're going to get when you go back to the office. And it's only when you hear lots of different things along the way in your career. When people say, it's man bites dog.
Yeah.
A dog biting a man happens every day.
Yeah.
It's not news. When a man bites a dog, now that's a different thing.
And that's in the report as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Tell me something I don't know. I think that's a really good starting point. Like when we start to think about stories and ideas for clients, often the instinct is to go and tell them the obvious point, and actually if you can flip that round, you'll get much more engagement and the engagement index says the same thing. Like, tell me something I don't know, tell me something I don't expect. I remember we did a campaign about van drivers where we talked about the white van man stereotype, but we did some research that actually showed that now they were more likely to be women, they were more likely to be vegan, they were more likely to listen to Radio 4. That was telling me something I didn't know.
Yeah.
So suddenly that's what makes it a talk. And I think we've talked in the report as well about the light and the shade. When you do those almost flip stories, the telling the opposite, the reverse, that gives you the shade, the light to the shade. It provides you with those like light-hearted, interesting, well, I never, or guess what, you won't believe this, like that and that's what you're sort of going for a lot of the time, I think.
Yeah, a lot of these principles I still use today. Like, so if you're thinking about a campaign or a press release, and like I remember some very simple journalist once said to me, the word is in the title, news. It has to be new, right? That's the and when you think about that in the most simple of basic forms, it's something that no one's heard of before, and that's what you're presenting. So your press release really has to be new. Not just trotting out the same old messages, not just trotting out the same old story.
And I think that's where you can really challenge a client to say, look, what you're saying here is not new, and if we're wasting our time if we just, and it doesn't have to be controversial, it doesn't have to be negative, but it does have to be different, because if you're playing into stereotypes, if you're going, not even playing into stereotypes in a bad way, I don't mean sort of gender stereotypes or anything like that. I mean, if you're telling me what I already knew, if that story I mentioned had been, that 95% of van drivers were men who liked reading The Sun, it would be a so what. That's the so what for me. So I think for brands, it's really about looking at the anti-point, the counterpoint. If you can find that, you're definitely, you're onto something.
There's also something about relatability.
Yes.
And we talk about putting people in the middle of the story a lot. Our latest report shows that 3/4 of people say the most engaging moments were relatable. They picked out the word relatable. So it's really important to actually remember, no matter what it is you're launching, talking about, saying, have an opinion on, how does it affect people, and how does it put people in the story? Even if you might not necessarily even be using a case study, which is what we condone a lot, but how does it actually have an effect on people? And that could be the driest of financial stories, but it still has to have the people.
We were looking at an idea this week about potholes.
Yeah.
And it's so easy to look at the pothole. It's a very dry subject.
Yeah.
It's everyone's writing about potholes, but if you're looking too much not into the potholes, nothing in a pothole, but if you're looking
I
at the
feel
pothole,
like I look into the pothole.
but if you can look at the impact it's had, how is it affecting people? Who's it affecting? What's it doing for them, or holding them back, or stopping them from doing? That's the people story. You always look at the outcome of the story rather than the problem itself.
Yeah. Okay. In the tradition of storytelling, in a succinct way, we'll wrap it up there.
Brilliant.
Thank you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching if you watched, and we'll see you at the next one.